The sound of a lone bullet cutting through the desolate Montana plains made Darius Winters' horse skitter sideways, nearly throwing him from the saddle. It was 1878, and the sprawling, untamed wilderness had claimed many lives before his. Darius steadied his mount with a practiced hand, his eyes scanning the horizon for the source of the shot. What he found instead, as he crested the next hill, was a scene that would forever alter the course of his solitary existence. A single wagon lay overturned in the tall grass, its canvas cover torn and flapping in the wind like a wounded bird. Bodies were strewn about a man and woman, both face down in the dirt, their blood staining the earth a dark crimson. Bandits, most likely. The territory was rife with them these days. Darius dismounted carefully, his hand hovering over his Colt revolver as he approached the grim scene. That's when he heard a small whimper coming from behind the wagon. His hand tightened on his gun as he rounded the broken vehicle, only to freeze at the sight before him. A little girl, no more than 5 years old, crouched beside a wooden trunk, her blonde hair tangled and face streaked with tears and dust. Her blue dress was torn at the hem, and her tiny fingers clutched a rag doll missing an arm. "Please don't hurt me, mister," she whispered, her voice quivering like a leaf in autumn. Darius holstered his weapon immediately, his weathered face softening as he knelt before the child. In his 32 years of life, he'd seen plenty of tragedy, but this alone child amid such carnage struck him deeply. "I ain't gonna hurt you, little one," he said gently, extending his hand. "What's your name?" "Lily," she answered, her eyes darting to the bodies beyond the wagon. "Are my mama and papa sleeping?" Darius felt a knot form in his throat. "Yes," he lied, "they're sleeping." He knew the truth would come later when she was ready. "Lily, it ain't safe for you to stay here. There are bad men about." The child's bottom lip trembled. "Where will I go?" "Papa said we were going to Oregon to start a new life." Darius looked into those innocent eyes and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He took her small hand in his rough, calloused one and said with unwavering certainty, "I'll be your father now, Lily. I promise to keep you safe." The little girl studied him for a long moment, as children often do when taking the measure of adults. Then, with the simple trust that only the very young possess, she nodded and clutched her doll tighter. "What about Mr. Buttons?" she asked, holding up the one-armed doll. "Mr. Buttons is coming too," Darius assured her, his heart aching with a tenderness he'd almost forgotten existed within him. After burying Lily's parents with as much dignity as the harsh land allowed, Darius gathered what supplies remained unlooted from the wagon. He fashioned a small seat for Lily on his horse, Thunderbolt, and settled her before him in the saddle. "Where are we going?" Lily asked as they turned away from the graves marked with simple wooden crosses. "To a place called Redemption Creek," Darius replied. "I've got a small ranch there, not much, but it's home." As they rode away, neither could have known that their journey was being observed by distant eyes. On a ridge half a mile away, Ruby Fairchild lowered her spyglass, her brow furrowed with concern. The schoolteacher had been tracking the same band of outlaws who had likely attacked the wagon. Now, she watched as the tall cowboy with the child rode east toward Redemption Creek, her own destination. Ruby tucked the spyglass into her saddlebag and mounted her mare. The man was headed to town with a child who clearly wasn't his own, and she intended to find out why. Having lost her own family to violence on the frontier 3 years prior, she wasn't about to let another child suffer if she could help it. The journey to Redemption Creek took Darius and Lily 2 days. The little girl was remarkably resilient, asking questions about everything they passed and slowly warming to the quiet cowboy who answered each inquiry with patience. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, Lily was chattering about the butterflies they saw and singing songs her mother had taught her. "Is this your town?" she asked as they approached the collection of wooden buildings that made up Redemption Creek. "It's where I come for supplies," Darius explained. "My ranch is a few miles outside of town, but first we need to get you some proper clothes and food." Redemption Creek was a small but growing settlement, a general store, saloon, blacksmith, small schoolhouse, and a dozen other establishments lined the main street. Folks nodded in greeting as Darius rode past, their curious gazes lingering on the child in his arms. He stopped first at Peterson's general store, lifting Lily down from the saddle. "We'll get you fixed up here," he promised her. Inside the store, Mr. Peterson, a rotund man with friendly eyes, looked up from his ledger. "Darius Winters, ain't seen you in town for nigh on 2 months. And who might this young lady be?" Before Darius could answer, the bell above the door chimed, and a woman stepped inside. She was tall and slender, with auburn hair pinned neatly beneath a modest hat. Her green eyes immediately found Lily, then moved to Darius with unmistakable suspicion. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice clear and confident, "I've come for those books you ordered for the school. Miss Fairchild, perfect timing. They arrived just yesterday." The shopkeeper bustled toward a stack of parcels behind the counter. Ruby Fairchild approached Darius and Lily, her smile warm for the child but cooler for the man. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Ruby Fairchild, the schoolteacher here in Redemption Creek." "Darius Winters," he replied, tipping his hat slightly. "I have a small ranch outside of town." "And who is this?" Ruby asked, kneeling to Lily's level. "I'm Lily," the child said, clutching Mr. Buttons tighter. "Mr. Darius is my new papa." Ruby's eyes shot up to meet Darius's, her expression hardening. "Is that so?" "How interesting, considering I observed you finding this child by an overturned wagon 2 days ago." Darius stiffened. "You were following us." "I was tracking the Blackwell gang. They've been raiding homesteads and wagons along the Western Trail." Ruby stood, placing a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "Sheriff Mills might be interested to know how you came by this child, Mr. Winters." "Those outlaws killed her parents," Darius said quietly, ensuring Lily was distracted by a colorful display of candy sticks. "I buried them proper." "What would you have had me do? Leave her there?" Ruby studied him, weighing his words. "No," she finally admitted. "But taking a child requires legal proceedings. There are orphanages in larger towns that could—" "No orphanage," Darius interrupted firmly. "I made her a promise." "A promise you may not be equipped to keep," Ruby countered. "Raising a child, especially a girl, requires—" "I know what it requires," Darius said, his voice low but intense. "I had a sister once. I know something about looking after young ones." Their conversation was interrupted by Mr. Peterson returning with Ruby's books. The tension between them was palpable as Ruby paid for her order, her gaze continually drifting to Lily, who was now examining a porcelain doll on a shelf. "Miss Fairchild," Darius said as she prepared to leave, "I'd be obliged if you'd keep this between us for now, at least until I can speak with the sheriff myself." Ruby hesitated, then nodded curtly. "1 week, Mr. Winters. After that, I'll be speaking with Sheriff Mills myself if you haven't." After she departed, Darius purchased supplies for Lily: dresses, shoes, a coat for the coming autumn, and food that would be easy to prepare. He added candy sticks at Lily's delighted gasp, and after a moment's consideration, the porcelain doll she'd been admiring. "For special occasions," he told her, as her eyes widened at the gift. "Mr. Buttons might get jealous if the new doll gets too much attention." By the time they left town, the sun was beginning its descent. Lily was wearing one of her new dresses, a simple blue gingham that made her eyes seem even brighter. They rode toward Darius's ranch, with Lily asking questions about the animals they would have and whether there were other children nearby. "It's just us," Darius explained, "and the animals. I've got horses, a few cattle, chickens, and a dog named Bear." "A dog named Bear?" Lily giggled. "Is he as big as a bear?" "Nearly," Darius smiled, finding it surprisingly easy to do so with this child. "He's part wolfhound, part who knows what. But he's gentle as a lamb once he knows your family." Family. The word felt strange on his tongue. It had been nearly 15 years since he'd had any semblance of family, not since his parents and sister had died of fever while he was away fighting in the war. He'd returned to find them buried and their small farm sold for taxes. Since then, he'd been a drifter, a cowhand, a sometimes deputy, until 5 years ago when he'd scraped together enough to buy his modest ranch. The ranch came into view as they rounded a bend in the trail, a small cabin with a barn and corral nestled against a backdrop of pines. It wasn't much, but it was solid and clean, built by Darius's own hands. Bear bounded out to meet them, a massive gray dog with intelligent eyes who stopped short at the sight of Lily. The dog cocked his head, then approached slowly, sniffing curiously at the child. "He's so big," Lily whispered, reaching out a tentative hand. "He won't hurt you," Darius assured her, dismounting and lifting her down. "Bear, this is Lily. She's family now." As if understanding, Bear gently licked Lily's hand, causing her to dissolve into giggles. The sound was like music in the quiet yard, a sound Darius realized had been missing from his life. The cabin was simple, one main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and a single bedroom. Darius had built a loft area above for storage, but it could easily be converted into a sleeping space for Lily. "It ain't much," he said, suddenly self-conscious about the bachelor accommodations. Lily walked around, touching the wooden table, looking at the few books on a shelf, examining the quilts folded at the foot of his bed. "It's nice," she declared. "My doll likes it too." That night, after a simple supper of beans and biscuits, Darius gave Lily his bed and slept on a pallet by the fire. As he lay awake, listening to the child's soft breathing, he wondered if he'd lost his mind. What did he know about raising a girl? What would happen when Ruby Fairchild made good on her threat to involve the sheriff? He had no answers, only the certainty that he couldn't bear the thought of Lily being taken to some orphanage, surrounded by strangers who might not care for her as she deserved. The following days established a routine. Darius taught Lily about the ranch, how to feed the chickens without scaring them, how to approach the horses safely, when to leave Bear alone with his bone. She followed him everywhere, asking questions, sometimes chattering so much he hardly had time to answer one before she was on to the next topic. On the fourth day, as they were mending a fence together, Lily holding the nails while Darius hammered, the sound of an approaching horse made them both look up. Ruby Fairchild rode toward them, her posture straight and proud atop her chestnut mare. "Miss Fairchild," Darius greeted her, setting down his hammer. "What brings you out this way?" Ruby dismounted gracefully, her riding skirt settling around her ankles. "I've come to check on Lily," she said directly, "and to remind you of our agreement." Lily ran to Ruby, excited to see a familiar face. "Miss Ruby, come see my chickens. I named them all." Ruby's stern expression softened as she allowed Lily to take her hand and lead her toward the chicken coop. Darius followed, watching as Ruby listened attentively to Lily's explanations of each hen's name and personality. "And this one's Queenie because she bosses all the others," Lily explained, pointing to a plump Rhode Island red. "You've learned a lot about chickens," Ruby observed with a genuine smile. "Mr. Darius teaches me everything," Lily said proudly. "And he's going to teach me to ride my own horse soon." Ruby's eyes met Darius's over Lily's head. "That's a big responsibility." "She's a quick learner," he said simply. After Lily had shown Ruby the entire ranch, including her new sleeping area in the converted loft, Darius suggested the child might like to gather eggs for supper. Once she was out of earshot, he turned to Ruby. "I'm going into town tomorrow to speak with Sheriff Mills," he said. "I aim to make this legal, whatever it takes." Ruby studied him, her expression thoughtful. "You've surprised me, Mr. Winters. I expected to find her neglected, but she seems happy here." "She deserves to be happy after what she's been through," Darius said, watching as Lily carefully placed eggs in her basket. "Yes, she does," Ruby agreed softly. "But a child, especially a girl, needs more than just a roof and food. She needs education, guidance from a woman's perspective as she grows." "I know that," Darius admitted. "That's why I was hoping you might be willing to tutor her. I can't take her to town for schooling every day, but I could bring her in once or twice a week, and maybe you could recommend some books I could help her with at home." Ruby's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You'd be willing to pay for private tutoring?" "Whatever it costs," Darius said firmly. "I promise to be her father, and that means giving her every chance I can." Something in Ruby's expression changed, then a softening, a reassessment. "I could come out here," she offered, "twice a week after school hours. It would be easier than you bringing her all the way to town." "You do that?" Darius asked, genuinely surprised by the offer. "For Lily," Ruby clarified, though her gaze lingered on his face a moment longer than necessary. "And I'll speak to Sheriff Mills with you tomorrow. 2 voices might be more persuasive than 1. The next day, Darius left Lily in the care of Mrs. Perkins, an elderly widow who lived halfway between his ranch and town. The woman was delighted to have a child to fuss over for a few hours, promising cookies and stories. Ruby met Darius outside the sheriff's office, dressed in a modest blue dress that brought out the green of her eyes. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," he replied, opening the door for her. Sheriff Jacob Mills was a fair man who had known Darius for years. He listened carefully as they explained the situation, his weathered face thoughtful. "So you found the child after her parents were killed by outlaws," he summarized, "and now you want to adopt her legally." "That's right," Darius confirmed. "It's unusual," the sheriff mused. "Single man adopting a girl child might raise some eyebrows with the judge in Helena." "Sheriff Mills," Ruby interjected, "I've seen Mr. Winters with Lily. He's providing a good home and I'll be tutoring her myself. Surely that counts for something." The sheriff's eyes moved between them, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Well now, that does change things a bit. Miss Fairchild's endorsement carries weight in this community." He scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Judge Harmon will be circuit riding through here next month. I'll wire him about your case. In the meantime, I'll draw up temporary guardianship papers." Relief washed over Darius. "Thank you, Sheriff." "Don't thank me yet," Mills warned. "Judge Harmon is a stickler for propriety. He might still insist the child be placed with a proper family, meaning a married couple." The implication hung in the air as Darius and Ruby left the sheriff's office. They walked in silence for a moment before Ruby spoke. "He thinks we're courting," she said, her cheeks coloring slightly. "It might be easier to let him think that for now," Darius suggested carefully. "Might help Lily's case." Ruby stopped walking and turned to face him. "Mr. Winters, are you suggesting we deceive a judge?" "No," he said quickly, "just not correcting assumptions until after the hearing." Ruby's eyes narrowed. "And what happens after the hearing, when the judge expects to see evidence of a continuing courtship or perhaps even marriage plans?" Darius hadn't thought that far ahead. "I suppose we'd have to tell the truth then," he admitted. "Which could result in Lily being removed from your care for obtaining guardianship under false pretenses," Ruby pointed out. "Is that a risk you're willing to take?" Darius removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair in frustration. "What would you have me do?" "I made that child a promise." Ruby's expression softened. "I admire your commitment to Lily, truly I do, but deception isn't the answer." She hesitated, then added, "Perhaps we could consider a more genuine arrangement." "Meaning?" Darius asked, though he suspected he knew exactly what she meant. "We could actually court," Ruby suggested, her voice steady despite the blush deepening on her cheeks. "Not as a deception, but as a genuine attempt to see if we might suit, for Lily's sake initially, but perhaps." She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with laying her thoughts so bare. Darius studied her, seeing Ruby Fairchild in a new light. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was principled, intelligent, and clearly cared for Lily. The thought of courting her wasn't unappealing in the slightest. "Miss Fairchild," he said carefully, "are you suggesting you might be willing to consider a future that includes both me and Lily?" "I'm suggesting we find out," she replied, "properly, with actual courtship, not pretense." A slow smile spread across Darius's face. "I'd be honored to court you, Miss Fairchild, though I should warn you I'm not much for social graces." "I've noticed," she said with a small smile of her own. "Fortunately, I'm an excellent teacher." And so began a courtship born of necessity, but quickly becoming something more. Ruby came to the ranch 3 times a week, twice to tutor Lily, and once for Sunday dinner, which became a tradition. Darius made the effort to clean up his appearance for these visits, shaving carefully and wearing his best shirt. Lily thrived under the arrangement, blossoming with Ruby's gentle guidance and Darius's steady presence. She learned to read from Ruby's patient instruction and to ride on a gentle pony Darius purchased specifically for her. The nightmares that had plagued her first weeks at the ranch grew less frequent, though she still occasionally crawled into Darius's bed during thunderstorms, clutching Mr. Buttons tightly. As autumn deepened toward winter, the judge's circuit ride approached. Ruby and Darius's courtship had evolved naturally, their initial wariness giving way to genuine affection and respect. They discovered shared interests, a love of reading, a dry sense of humor, a deep appreciation for the beauty of the Montana landscape. Their first kiss happened on a crisp October evening after Lily had fallen asleep as Ruby prepared to ride back to her small house in town. "It's getting dark earlier," Darius observed, standing beside her horse. "Perhaps you should start staying in town after your visits." "Perhaps," Ruby agreed, though her tone suggested she was not entirely convinced. "Or," Darius said hesitantly, "you could stay here in the cabin. I could sleep in the barn." Ruby's eyebrows rose. "That would certainly set tongues wagging in Redemption Creek." "You're right," Darius conceded. "It was a foolish suggestion." "No," Ruby said softly, placing her hand on his arm. "It was a kind one. You're concerned for my safety." Their eyes met in the fading light, and Darius felt a pull toward her that had nothing to do with their arrangement for Lily's sake. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning at first, then deepening as Ruby responded, her hand moving to his shoulder. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I should go," Ruby whispered, though she made no move to mount her horse. "You should," Darius agreed, equally motionless. It took another long moment before Ruby finally climbed into the saddle. "I'll see you on Sunday," she said, her voice carrying a new warmth. "I'll be counting the hours," Darius replied honestly. As he watched her ride away, Darius realized with startling clarity that what had begun as an arrangement of convenience had become something he couldn't imagine living without. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Judge Harmon arrived in Redemption Creek on a blustery November day. The hearing was held in the town hall, with half the town in attendance out of curiosity. Darius wore his Sunday best. Lily was scrubbed clean in a new dress Ruby had helped her make, and Ruby sat beside them, a picture of respectability in her green dress and modest hat. The judge, a stern-faced man with spectacles and a well-trimmed beard, reviewed the paperwork Sheriff Mills had prepared, occasionally glancing up to study Darius and Lily. "Mr. Winters," he finally said, "this is an unusual case. You have no blood relation to this child, yet you seek to adopt her as your own." "Yes, Your Honor," Darius confirmed. "I found Lily after outlaws killed her parents. I promised to care for her, and I aim to keep that promise." "A noble sentiment," the judge acknowledged, "but raising a child, particularly a girl child, requires more than good intentions. Do you have the means to provide for her? The knowledge to raise her properly?" Before Darius could answer, Ruby spoke up. "If I may, Your Honor, I've been tutoring Lily these past weeks. Mr. Winters has proven himself to be an exemplary guardian. The child is thriving under his care." Judge Harmon's gaze shifted to Ruby. "And you are, Miss?" "Fairchild, Your Honor, Ruby Fairchild. I'm the schoolteacher here in Redemption Creek. And your interest in this matter extends beyond professional concern for the child's education?" the judge inquired, his meaning clear. Ruby's cheeks colored slightly, but her voice remained steady. "Mr. Winters and I have been courting, yes." The judge nodded, seemingly satisfied with this information. "And the child, Lily is it? Come forward, young lady." Lily approached the judge's table, her small hand clutching Mr. Buttons tightly. "Lily," Judge Harmon said, his voice gentling, "are you happy living with Mr. Winters?" Lily nodded vigorously. "He's my papa now. He teaches me about horses and lets me name all the chickens, and he never gets mad when I have bad dreams." "I see," the judge said, a smile briefly softening his stern features. "And what about Miss Fairchild? Do you like her as well?" "Oh, yes," Lily exclaimed. "She teaches me to read and write, and she's teaching me to sew, and she makes Papa smile." A ripple of chuckles moved through the assembled townspeople at this innocent observation. Judge Harmon allowed himself another small smile before returning to his serious demeanor. Mr. Winters, raising a child is a lifetime commitment. Are you prepared for that responsibility? I am, Your Honor, Darius said without hesitation. Lily is my family now. The judge considered for a long moment before speaking again. Based on the testimony I've heard and the recommendations of Sheriff Mills and Miss Fairchild, I am inclined to grant your petition for adoption. He paused, peering over his spectacles. However, I would feel more confident in this decision if there were a more permanent arrangement ensuring Lily would have both maternal and paternal guidance. The room fell silent as the judge's meaning became clear. Ruby's hand found Darius's beneath the table, squeezing gently. Your Honor, Darius began, Miss Fairchild and I have indeed been courting, but we haven't yet discussed marriage actually, Ruby interrupted, her voice clear despite the flush on her cheeks. We have discussed the possibility, though perhaps not as formally as we should have. Darius turned to look at her in surprise, finding her green eyes steady on his. Is that so? Judge Harmon asked, looking between them. Well then, perhaps this matter can be resolved more satisfactorily than I initially expected. I'll defer my final ruling until tomorrow morning. That should give you young people time to have any discussions that might be necessary. As they left the town hall, whispers and curious glances followed them. Lily, oblivious to the undercurrents, skipped ahead to pet a dog tied outside the general store. You didn't have to say that, Darius said quietly to Ruby. About us discussing marriage, didn't I? Ruby asked, her eyes following Lily. It's not entirely untrue. We've both been thinking about it, haven't we? For Lily's sake, if nothing else. Not just for Lily's sake, Darius admitted, taking her hand. Ruby, I never expected to find someone like you. I certainly never expected to feel this way again after losing so much. Ruby turned to face him, her expression serious. Darius, are you asking me to marry you because the judge all but ordered it or because you want to? Both, he answered honestly. The judge's nudging might have pushed the timing, but my feelings for you are real. I think I've been falling in love with you since that day you rode out to check on Lily and ended up naming all the chickens with her. A smile bloomed on Ruby's face. Queenie was a particularly inspired name. Ruby Fairchild, Darius said, taking both her hands in his. I'm not a man of fancy words, but I'm asking you proper now. Will you marry me? Be a mother to Lily and a wife to me. I promise to do everything in my power to make you both happy. Ruby's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. Their moment was interrupted by Lily running back to them. Papa, Miss Ruby, can we get candy sticks, please? Darius laughed, lifting the child into his arms. I think this calls for candy sticks all around. We're celebrating. What are we celebrating? Lily asked, looking between them curiously. Well, little one, Darius said, his eyes meeting Ruby's over the child's head. Miss Ruby has agreed to marry me. That means she'll be living with us at the ranch and she'll be your mama. Lily's eyes widened with delight. Really? She looked to Ruby for confirmation. Really, Ruby assured her, touching the child's cheek tenderly. If that's all right with you. Lily's answer was to fling her arms around Ruby's neck, nearly toppling out of Darius's arms in the process. I've been wishing for this every night when I see the first star. The following morning, Judge Harmon was pleased to hear of their engagement. I thought as much, he said with satisfaction. In light of this development, I am granting Mr. Winters's petition for adoption. Miss Fairchild, soon to be Mrs. Winters, your willingness to take on maternal responsibilities for this child speaks to your character. With the stroke of a pen, Lily officially became Lily Winters, and Darius became her legal father. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church in Redemption Creek. The entire town turned out for the occasion, partly out of genuine goodwill and partly out of curiosity about the unconventional family being formed. Ruby wore a simple cream-colored dress with lace at the collar and cuffs, a wreath of late autumn flowers crowning her auburn hair. Darius, clean-shaven and uncomfortable in his stiff collar, waited at the altar with Sheriff Mills standing as his best man. Lily, serving as flower girl, scattered rose petals along the aisle before taking her place beside Darius, clutching both Mr. Buttons and her porcelain doll. As Ruby spoke her vows, her voice steady and sure, Darius felt a sense of completion he'd never expected to find. This woman, intelligent, principled, beautiful, was choosing to bind her life to his to help him raise Lily to create a future together. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Their kiss was brief but tender, mindful of the audience and particularly of Lily watching with wide, happy eyes. As they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Winters, Lily took both their hands, forming a visible bond between the three of them. The small reception at the town hall afterward was filled with well wishes and gifts, practical items for their home, toys for Lily, and promises of future dinner invitations. Through it all, Darius found his gaze returning to Ruby, still amazed that this remarkable woman had agreed to share his life. "Happy, Mrs. Winters?" he asked quietly as they shared a moment alone while Lily was being fussed over by the ladies of the church auxiliary. "Remarkably so, Mr. Winters," Ruby replied, her eyes shining, "though I believe our happiness has only just begun." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep in her loft bed, exhausted from the excitement, Ruby and Darius faced the awkwardness of their first night as husband and wife. Despite the circumstances that had hastened their marriage, their feelings were genuine, but the transition from courtship to marriage was still a significant one. "I had a room prepared for you," Darius said, showing her the small bedroom he'd added onto the cabin during the 2 weeks of their engagement. "I thought you might want some privacy, at least at first." Ruby touched his face gently. "That was thoughtful of you." "But I didn't marry you for appearances, Darius. I married you because I love you." Their kiss deepened, speaking of a shared future and promises kept. In the quiet of the night, they committed themselves to each other fully, their union sealing the bond that had been growing between them since that first meeting in Peterson's general store. Winter settled over Redemption Creek with a blanket of snow, transforming the landscape into a pristine wonderland. The small family settled into a routine, Darius tending the ranch, Ruby dividing her time between teaching at the schoolhouse and tutoring Lily at home, and Lily learning and growing with each passing day. Christmas approached, bringing with it preparations that filled the cabin with warmth and joy. Ruby taught Lily to make paper chains and popcorn strings, while Darius ventured into the forest to cut a small pine tree that soon stood in the corner of their main room, decorated with handmade ornaments and candles. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire after Lily had gone to bed, Ruby rested her head on Darius's shoulder. "I have a gift for you," she said softly, "one that can't be wrapped." Darius turned to look at her, noting the special glow about her that had seemed to intensify in recent weeks. "What is it?" Ruby took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby," she whispered. "Next summer, if my calculations are correct." Darius's eyes widened, a mixture of joy and fear washing over him. "A baby, are you certain?" Ruby nodded, watching his face carefully. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy," Darius repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Ruby, I never thought I'd have any of this, a wife, a daughter, and now a baby on the way. I'm more than happy. I'm blessed beyond measure." He kissed her then, pouring all his love and gratitude into the gesture. When they parted, Ruby's eyes were misty with tears. "I was so focused on my teaching, on building a life for myself after losing my family," she confessed. "I never imagined finding this kind of happiness again." "We found each other because of Lily," Darius said thoughtfully. "Sometimes I wonder if those outlaws had never attacked her family's wagon." "Don't," Ruby said, placing her fingers gently over his lips. "We can't change the past. We can only honor it by living fully in the present." The next morning, Lily's delight at her Christmas gifts, a new dress, books, a carved wooden horse Darius had made, was heightened by the news that she would become a big sister. "A real baby?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "Will it be a brother or a sister?" "We won't know until the baby arrives," Ruby explained, drawing the child into a warm embrace. "I hope it's a sister," Lily declared, "but I'll love it even if it's a brother." As winter yielded to spring and spring blossomed into summer, Ruby's belly grew round with new life. Darius expanded the cabin further, adding another bedroom for the coming child. Lily helped paint the walls a cheerful yellow, her excitement growing with each passing day. On a warm July evening, as thunderclouds gathered on the horizon, Ruby's labor began. The midwife was summoned from town, and Lily was sent to stay with Mrs. Perkins. Despite her protests that she wanted to help through the night, Darius paced outside the bedroom door, wincing at Ruby's cries of pain, praying for her safety and that of their child. The memory of his parents and sister, lost to fever, haunted him as the hours stretched on. Just as dawn was breaking, a new cry pierced the air, the lusty wail of a newborn. The midwife opened the door, her face tired but smiling. "Mr. Winters, you have a son." Darius entered the room to find Ruby propped up in bed, her face pale but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up as he approached, her smile weary but triumphant. "Meet your son," she said softly, pulling back the blanket to reveal a tiny face with a shock of dark hair. Darius sat beside her on the bed, his hand trembling slightly as he touched his son's cheek. "He's perfect," he whispered, "just like his mother." "What shall we name him?" Ruby asked. Darius considered for a moment. "What about Thomas, after your father?" Tears welled in Ruby's eyes at the suggestion. "Thomas Winters," she tried the name. "It suits him." Later that day, when Ruby had rested and the midwife had departed, Darius brought Lily home to meet her new brother. The little girl approached the bed cautiously, her eyes wide with wonder. "He's so tiny," she whispered, peering at the baby in Ruby's arms. "Would you like to hold him?" Ruby asked. "You'll need to sit very still." Lily nodded solemnly, climbing onto the bed and sitting with her back straight. Darius carefully placed the swaddled infant in her arms, supporting Thomas's head. "Hello, Thomas," Lily said softly. "I'm your big sister, Lily. I'm going to teach you everything I know." The scene before him, Lily cradling her baby brother while Ruby looked on with love, filled Darius with a sense of completion he'd never thought possible. This was his family, built not from blood but from choice, from promises made and kept. 5 years later, Darius stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Ruby, now rounded with their third child, helped Lily and Thomas feed the chickens. Lily, 10 years old now, was tall for her age, her blonde hair plaited neatly down her back. Thomas, an energetic 4-year-old with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, chased after the hens with delighted squeals. Redemption Creek had grown in those years, as had the Winters Ranch. Darius had expanded his herds, built a larger barn, and even hired 2 hands to help with the increasing workload. Ruby still taught at the schoolhouse 3 days a week, though she had announced her intention to take a longer break after this baby arrived. As he watched his family, Darius reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. That fateful day when he'd found a terrified child beside an overturned wagon had changed everything. The promise he'd made, "I'll be your father," had led him to a life richer than he could have imagined. Ruby looked up, catching his eye, and smiled that special smile she reserved just for him. She said something to Lily, then made her way toward the porch, one hand supporting her lower back. "You look thoughtful," she observed as she joined him, leaning into his embrace. "Just counting my blessings," Darius replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. And remembering how it all began, Ruby's hand found his, their fingers intertwining as they had countless times over the years. "With a promise to a little girl," she said softly. "The best promise I ever made," Darius agreed, watching as Lily patiently showed Thomas how to scatter corn without frightening the chickens. "Though promising to love you for the rest of my days comes in a close second." Ruby laughed, the sound as dear to him now as it had been the first time he'd heard it. "Careful, Mr. Winters, you're beginning to develop quite a way with words." "I had an excellent teacher," he replied, drawing her closer as the sun began its descent over the Montana hills, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. In the distance, Lily called out to them, waving excitedly as she and Thomas discovered newly laid eggs in the henhouse. The simple joy in her voice, the confidence with which she moved through the world, was testament to the love that had surrounded her since that terrible day when she'd lost her first family. "Papa, Mama, look what we found." Darius and Ruby moved together down the porch steps to join their children, their family complete not by blood but by choice, by love, and by promises kept through all the seasons of their lives together. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Darius Winters knew with absolute certainty that he had found his true redemption not in the creek that gave the town its name, but in the eyes of a frightened child who had needed him, and in the heart of a woman brave enough to help him keep his promise.